professor in chemical engineering, and I'm the director of the Center for Global Engineering. And global engineering was something that we started just about 3.5 years ago. Something where we're going to try to look at problems a little bit differently. Look for problems outside of our regular sphere. And let me just ask you a few questions to set that up. How many of you use a toilet today? How many of you remember to flush after you use your toilet? Good. How many thought about where your pee and poo went after you flushed? Thank you. A few hands. This is something that we take so much for granted in Canada. Just with a simple push of a button or lever, our human waste gets flushed away out of our toilet, out of our bathroom, out of our houses, out of sight. We don't have to think about it anymore. And we have a very nice, clean, and sanitary environment to live in. No smells, very, very little smell. But what we're so used to, what we take for granted, is not a reality for 2.6 billion people in the world. Mark Arnold earlier said that there's 7 billion people in the world right now. So that's more than 1/3 of the world's population. The reality for them is something very, very different than what we're used to. 1 billion of them openly defecate because there are no facilities. They go in the field, they go in the bushes. The rest of them have toilets that drain directly into open pits that are exposed to insects and rodents who can traipse through that human waste and go wherever else they go, transmitting pathogens and causing human disease. Some others have their toilets drained directly into rivers and lakes, contaminating the drinking water source for these people. This is what some of these toilets look like. So these are pictures that were taken by a collaborator of mine in Bangladesh. If you look at, again, this it sort of works. This toilet in the river. So here is a platform where people just go right through a hole in the platform. The human waste goes right into the river. You actually have to walk on bamboo sticks in order to get to the toilet. These two, this one an outdoor toilet and this one in a slum, this is what a slum looks like, are toilets where people go through a hole and it just goes into an open pit. Okay. This is one of the nicer ones, the one on the left there. So that's a reality for 2.6 billion people in the world. Even if their toilets, even if people have toilets that are pit latrines with a closed cover, with a cover that encloses it, which doesn't count towards it. That means it's better than basic sanitation. So it doesn't count towards the 2.6 billion people that I mentioned. It will look something like this. And it's not, this isn't great either. These are pictures that I took just 2 weeks ago in Durban, South Africa. So this is a fairly low income neighborhood. And this is where the house is. You see the front door. This is the toilet hut, the toilet shack. The toilet is inside. It's a sit toilet. And the human waste just goes from that toilet right into, this is sort of the back of the toilet hut. It goes into a pit latrine, which has been closed. There's a cover over it. And these particular people get a free emptying of that pit latrine once every 5 years. Okay? So they're living 5 feet away from potentially up to 5 years worth of human waste. Okay? And they did this emptying for us to show us how it's done. This is something called a gulper, which pumps up the human waste. It's the most disgusting smell you ever want to imagine. But worse than that, this one is called a wet pit latrine. It's called a wet pit latrine because it gets wet. This house happens to be in the lower ground. So when it rains, the rain gets into that pit latrine, the contents of the pit latrine overflows. Okay? And it overflows everywhere, including near the front door of the house. So the mother of the house talked about how having to watch her kids get up in the morning and having to cross this stream of human waste in order to get out of the house. So that's a reality for a lot of people in the world. 2.6 billion people in the world. I never thought about it until about a year and a half ago. Okay? So the reality is so different from what our privileged lives are in Toronto and in Canada that I never even thought of this as a problem that I should work on. Okay? Let me tell you about a different problem. Actually, let me back up a little bit. So those 2.6 billion people, a little bit of data. That's 75% of Canada's population. And as I said, more than 1/3 of the world's population. At any instant in time, half of the people in the developing regions of the world are sick from diarrheal diseases. Imagine half the people in this room being sick. Or imagine you yourself being sick half of the time. That's their reality. 3.8 million people die from diarrheal diseases every year globally. 1.8 million children do. It's the second largest killer of children under the age of 5 in the world. Beyond that,
Gotcha.
Just think about this. If there are no toilets in schools, then it means when girls begin to menstruate, they stop going to school. If there are no toilets in the home or very close to the home, it means when girls and women have to relieve themselves at night and have to go far away from home, they're at risk for being attacked. The issue is massive, and yet we don't usually think about it. Let me give you a second example. Okay. This has to do with childhood pneumonia. I said diarrhea was the second largest killer of children under 5 years old globally. Childhood pneumonia is number 1. And medical oxygen. Oxygen is an essential medicine for treating childhood pneumonia. And oxygen is usually supplied one of 2 ways. Either by using a gas cylinder filled with oxygen, or using something called an oxygen concentrator. And this is a picture I took in the Gambia about a couple of years ago. And you can see here, this is a small baby who is on the oxygen concentrator. So the oxygen concentrator works by taking air from the ambient, just sort of air that we breathe normally, and separating out the nitrogen from oxygen using a process called molecular sieve adsorption. And the enriched oxygen can then be given to the children. But what if the hospital that you've taken your 2-year-old child to is in a place in the world where there's only power 4 hours a day? And that's a reality in many parts of the world. The oxygen cylinder, the gas cylinder, so those are usually done by, oxygen is produced in large plants using cryogenic processes. And then under high pressure, the oxygen is filled into these cylinders, and then the cylinders are transported by trucks to wherever they need to go. And we have lots of gas cylinders in our hospitals. We never have to worry about it here in Toronto. But what if the clinic is 370 kilometers or 6 hours away from the closest oxygen producing plant? And what if it would take 6 hours to drive during dry season? And what if the roads are like this during dry season? Imagine what it's like during rainy season, where you may get 4, 5, 6 months of rainy season a year in many countries. Imagine how long that would take. I was in a car that actually went through this road. It was an air-conditioned, nice Jeep, and I was exhausted at the end of that trip. Imagine having to transport oxygen cylinders in that kind of condition. So these are just 2 examples of many, many massive problems that we in Toronto don't think about. I actually have traveled to these places. I've been an eco-tourist, gone to places where I saw beggars in cities, saw very poor villages. I saw open defecation. I saw poorly equipped hospitals. I've seen this. And yet, until about 4 years ago, it never even occurred to me that I should make use of my engineering expertise and try to address some of these problems. I was so ingrained in my own reality. There were so many assumptions that I never even knew about that I had, that I looked at these things. I was an eco-tourist. I was looking at this. Those problems were not my problems. They were not my reality. Okay. But about 4 years ago, I started to realize, I've been an engineering professor for some time. I teach very bright engineering students. I was doing research in something called drug delivery. I supervise graduate students. And for the most part, I was having fun, and I enjoyed myself. So I was doing fine in my career. But then I started to think, where's my research going? What is that impact? And I realized that even at its very best, even if my research succeeded beyond expectations, it would only improve the lives of the most privileged people in the world incrementally. So that started to bother me. I was like Bob. Every day, it's like peanut butter, drug delivery, peanut butter, drug delivery. I thought about jumping off a building. But I didn't. I had an idea. And the idea was, how about if I try to figure out what I can do in terms of developing world issues? And I started to get myself educated on this. And I didn't actually have a plan, so I differ with Ryan on this. I didn't actually have a plan. I kind of pointed at the menu, and I hope for the best. But I felt, I knew that this was the right thing to do. And we did many things. We founded this thing called the Center for Global Engineering, and we've been working on a number of projects, which has just been absolutely fantastic. Just a huge amount of fun. My life has changed. And the project that we got the most profile for, let me just back this up so what you see is toilets, because I'm going to talk about toilets now. Okay. What we got a large amount of profile for, and we started working on this about 15 months ago, was that we were challenged by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to come up with a toilet, to reinvent the toilet. Okay? A toilet that can work where there is no power, there's no grid power, where there's no running water, where there's no sewage plumbing. So people don't openly defecate because they choose to. They don't use these latrines because they choose to. They don't have sewage plumbing. And to put that infrastructure in place would be really expensive and it would take a long time. So the criteria that we were asked to design for was to come up with a toilet that would work off the grid. So no grid power, no running clean water, no sewage plumbing. And they wanted us to disinfect the human waste within about 24 hours. Okay? So no buildup of human waste accumulating 5 feet from your home. And it had to, because we're addressing very poor people in the world, it had to cost less than 5 cents per person per day, including the operating cost and the amortized capital cost. In fact, at this conference in Durban just a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to one of the program officers, and they're thinking about pushing that down to 1 cent per person per day. Extremely tough. And oh, by the way, please also make this attractive and non-smelly so people will want to use it. And oh, by the way, can you also try to capture some of the valuable chemicals or water or energy content in the human waste? Really tough problem. But when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And we came up with something, and it was such a huge amount of fun. When the challenge is so high, so big, people come up with really great ideas. And our idea is very, very simple, actually, is to dry the human feces
And in our first prototype, we rolled it between rollers to flatten it out. Think of it as a pasta maker. It dries. And then it goes into a smoldering unit. And smoldering is just like a barbecue. Except instead of using charcoal as the fuel, our fuel is the dry feces. Okay. So very quickly, the feces is completely destroyed. I can show you data, I can show you graphs, I can show you videos, but I won't do that. And the technical details are not important in this talk. And with the liquid, we expect lots of solid contaminants in that liquid. So we filter it through a sand filter and then do the final disinfection with UV. Actually, I love that suit. And so but we use sand. One of the important things about what we did, every single process, we wanted to make it very, very simple to operate. We wanted to make it easy to maintain using the local capacity. And we wanted all the replacement parts and materials to be things that are locally available. Give me an example. Filtration. One of the most common ways of doing filtering is using a membrane. But we chose not to use a membrane because membranes are expensive. And once they clog and the local communities can't find membranes to replace it, then the toilet's just not going to get used anymore. So that's why we went towards a sand filter, because sand is easily available. So that's what we did with that project. And I have to say, the project is so important that everyone on my team, and it's a huge team, is incredibly motivated and dedicated. I've never seen engineering students work so hard. And every other one of my projects as well. Every morning I wake up now and I'm excited to go to work. I don't think, oh, it's going to be another day of peanut butter. It's just a huge amount of fun. So the main point for this, the main point to make to you today is that there are many, many problems in the world. Look outside of Toronto. Look outside of your own realities. Question your own assumptions and perspectives. You just might find some really, really important and really, really interesting problems that's going to engage you and make you the best that you can be, because you're going to be so motivated by those problems. A couple other things that I learned along the way is, one of them is that you need skills. It's not enough to just say, I want to change the world, or that I want to have impact. You have to bring some skills to the table. In fact, when we first started working on the toilet project, somebody asked me, you haven't been working on sanitation. What makes you think you can do sanitation? And the question actually kind of puzzled me, because I don't think of myself as any particular thing, other than a very well-educated engineer. I have good engineering skills, and if you have a good foundation in something, in your specialization, you should be able to apply your problem-solving skills, your analytical skills, to many, many different problems. So it's very important for you at this point in your life, when your high school education is not yet finished, when your university education is ahead of you, whatever you go into, work hard at your studies, learn as much as you can. The more skills and knowledge you have, the more options you're going to have. And as you come up with this great idea, and we say, I have an idea, when you're 15 or 20 or 30 or 40, if you have those strong fundamentals, then you can go in many different directions. You can execute on those ideas. The better foundation you have, the more ideas you can execute on. Second thing I learned, second other thing I learned, so I'm close, I'm done, is that it's important to get out of your specialization. You have to be strong in your specialization. But in order for your solution to be impactful, as an engineer, I've come to understand that a business model is also important. Somebody's got to make profit from this in order to be motivated to manufacture it. Social behavior change is important. People have been used to defecating openly their entire lives. What's going to make them want to use a toilet? Okay? Many policies are important as well. Okay?
So no matter what specialization you go into, business, engineering, doesn't matter, architecture, if your only tool is a hammer, then the only problems that you can work on are nails. But join tools, join with a wrench, a saw, whatever. Come up with an entire bag of tools. Build a team full of tools, and maybe together you can build a house. Okay. So I'm finished.